We're going to talk about the 4 Ps as well as other Ps that we can apply to gender inequity to help reduce inequities. Let's start with PC, the politically correct language. Sex and gender are not the same thing, for starters. Very simply, sex, when we talk about sex, we're talking about biology, basically what's down there. When we talk about gender, we're talking about basically what's up here, or what's out there. It's a social construct. Gloria Steinem refers to gender as probably the most restricting force in American life. And then former President Bush, the daddy Bush, actually says the gender thing, that's history. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. Then there's equity and equality, 2 different things. To simplify, equity is a stop on the road to equality. You can't reach equality unless you've got equity. So a few years ago, USAID put together a group, the Interagency Gender Working Group, and they came up with this continuum to help programs integrate gender into their programs. And it goes all the way from the left, exploitative. Programs that exploit gender inequities are those that actually reinforce gender stereotypes that can be very harmful. Accommodating are the programs that sort of work around gender inequity but don't really reduce it. And then gender transformative are those programs that actually address gender inequities head on. Let's get to the P, to the problem. And this is really a challenge, I must say. I've worked in many parts of the world, including this country. This is a huge problem. This is a problem that we couldn't talk about in 30 minutes or in a whole week. So I'm just going to give you a few little facts, a little factoids, a little bit of a global look at this. So of the almost 800 million illiterate people in the world, 2/3 are female. In the developing world, 42% of girls are not enrolled in school. And I don't know if any of you recently read this article by Christoph in the New York Times, an article called "What's So Scary About Smart Girls?" He says the greatest threat to extremism isn't drones firing missiles, but girls reading books. And I think that that's true, that girl power is pretty scary. And if you teach girls or have girls as daughters, you know what I'm talking about, or were girls, powerful girls. 1 in 9 girls around the world is married before the age of 15. And India does have the largest number of child brides at 47%, primarily because they have such a large population. This photo, though, is from Yemen. So there are many beliefs, cultural practices that go into this problem of child brides, and it's a huge, huge issue. One belief, very interesting, is that there's a belief that prepubescent girls as brides bring a blessing to the man and the family. The leading cause, not surprising, of death for girls ages 15 to 19 is actually pregnancy and childbirth, complications from pregnancy and childbirth. So Christoph also talks about gendercide, where more girls are killed or have been killed in the last 50 years just because they were girls than men in all the wars of the 20th century. There's a huge, huge focus on son preference in many countries. And that's because boys carry on the family name. They believe that they bring economic security. Families put a lot of the money, their money into marrying the girl and educating the boy. So that's kind of just the way it is in many countries, many patriarchal countries. At least 1 in 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused in her lifetime. This is pretty scary. 70% of the people who are living in poverty are women. Not surprising. It's not all about women. Men have some issues as well. Men have a shorter life expectancy than women. Globally, road injuries kill 3 times more men than women. There are certain gender expectations and norms for men that actually drive them to drive faster, drive inebriated, drink more, smoke more. And men also have a much higher rate of erectile dysfunction than women. I just thought I'd throw that in. But no country is immune. We are not talking today just about developing countries and emerging markets. As another P, Nancy Pelosi, points out, she reminds us that women continue to earn 77 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And if you're an African American woman, it's even less. You're making 68 cents. If you're Latina, it's 58 cents. Then there's the Global Gender Gap Report that's done by the World Economic Forum every year. And the recent one shows the United States in 23rd place out of 133 countries. So we're not doing so great in terms of gender equity. We are the only OECD country with no national paid maternity or paternity leave policy. Okay, and there are other countries that have fully paid leave policies, another group of countries that have partially paid leave policies for 40 weeks. We also get pretty low scores in terms of putting women in leadership positions. Once again, Christoph reminds us that about 100,000 girls under 18 living in the U.S. are trafficked into commercial sex every year. So we are not immune by any means. Luckily, we've got some P's up our sleeves. So as I talk about the 4 P's and how we can apply these to reducing inequities, I'm not going to be talking separately about promotion. I'm going to be sort of weaving promotion into the other P's, into product strategies, price, and place strategies, which is the way it should be. Let's talk about product strategies. How do you apply a product strategy to gender inequity? I think one of the first challenges is identifying a tangible behavior. I mean, gender equity is a very vast, abstract concept. So what is a tangible behavior, product, or service that can be applied to reduce gender inequity? I'll tell you that one of the behavioral indicators when evaluating gender equity is actually participation in decision making. So just to let you know, this is a question that's hard to answer, but there are some specific indicators that help us identify behaviors. So in terms of a product strategy, let's talk first about positioning. Dr. Troutman was talking about framing earlier. We use the P word as well, positioning. Okay, so how do you position? What is there to position? Well, for starters, we can think about positioning gender equity. Instead of positioning gender equity as a battle between the sexes or as female women's empowerment, we really should be positioning gender equity as a step toward equality for all. We really should. In fact, the Gender Gap Report that the World Economic Forum does is not based on women's empowerment, but is based on actual gender equity, parity. We can think about repositioning men and masculinity and strength, and there are several programs globally that are doing that. Just to begin shifting dangerous social norms, I should say. The Men Can Stop Rape program in this country has also spread to other countries. There's another program being funded by the Netherlands government in Indonesia, Brazil, Rwanda, and South Africa that's beginning to look at redefining masculinity, what does it mean to be a man, that sort of thing. Here's the P program, another P, which stands for Padre or Pi. This is a fatherhood initiative looking at getting men involved, really, in traditionally female roles in terms of parenting. There are lots of letters out there. The H project is Homing and Hombre, again, what it means to be a man. We can also look at repositioning women and femininity. And no, we don't want to be seen as shadows of men. We don't want to be their shadows. We also don't want to be seen and not heard. This is from UN Women, a campaign that UN Women is doing. We certainly don't want to be seen like this. This is more obscene, I think, than seen, although this is what was put together, Traits of the Perfect Woman. Pretty scary. Anybody out there look like this? I know I don't. I think Unilever had it right when they designed the Real Beauty campaign, meant to redefine beauty. Unfortunately, the same company is also selling Axe to men and reinforcing a lot of kind of nasty stereotypes when it comes to, yeah, for sure. So Facebook and the Girl Scouts also got it right in their Ban Bossy campaign, where they're promoting leadership for girls, and they're using some awesome role models, including Michelle and, is that Beyonce? Right. So positioning is something we can borrow from social marketing. What about tangible products? Can anybody think of any tangible products that are related to gender equity or inequity? Anyone? It's a tough one, right? No? No thoughts? How about Legos? How about Legos and little girls? Charlotte Benjamin, this little 7-year-old girl, wrote a letter to Lego about, she was really unhappy that most of the little models showed girls sort of watching TV, cooking, resting at home, when the boys had all the fun. And this went viral. This got something like 3,000 hits, and her mother sent it to Legos. And as a result, Charlotte got action. These female scientist figures are being introduced in August. So here's a tangible product strategy. We can develop more toys, more cues in the environment to enable girls to really be whoever they want to be. And then in terms of creating a product offering, what could we create in order to reduce inequity? Well, certainly the demand is there, talking about in marketing terms, supply and demand. The demand is there for more options, more opportunities for girls, especially economic and educational opportunities. We need to do more work designing more product offerings on the supply side. We need to provide more opportunities for girls and boys. Let's look at price. In terms of price, there are several programs going on in different parts of the world that are working. One is this cash transfer program in India. The translation of the name of the project is Our Daughter, Our Wealth. And this was developed in 1994, and the way it works is if you have a girl child, when she's born, you sign up for a bond, and you agree not to marry your daughter off until she's 18. As a result, you get enough funding to put your daughter through school. When she turns 18, if she's not married, you actually get the cash back. And they did an evaluation 18 years after after this started, and the evaluation showed actually that school enrollment had doubled as a result of this program between 1994 and 2001. And girls, the age of marriage increased as well. So this is a beautiful price strategy that's been working well. Economic incentives are working in other parts of the world. For example, Bangladesh, when they broke away from Pakistan, put a real focus on, the government really focused on education for boys and girls. And as a result, girls' enrollment is actually higher than boys at the moment in Bangladesh. But what they did was they provided economic incentives to families for the loss of income, because girls do a lot of work not only at home domestically, but as farmers. So for the loss of income, the government actually paid parents to make sure their daughters could stay in school, and in return, parents had to sign an agreement that they wouldn't marry their daughters off until they were 18. This has also been very successful. Microfinance, very successful. You might be familiar with the Grameen Bank, again in Bangladesh, and Mohammed Yunus, who was a Nobel Prize winner. And his bank, Grameen Bank, mostly loans to women, and these women have actually done an amazing job of bringing their families out of poverty with a very high payback rate as well. So if we're talking upstream to policymakers, the price pitch might be something like this. Countries with more gender equality have better economic growth, and that's a fact. If you look at the Global Gender Gap Report, the 4 top countries are all high-income countries: Iceland, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. So now let's look at place strategies. When we talk about place, we're looking at access and convenience. Certainly we're not even close to equal access. Equal access to transportation, not only transportation, but safe transportation. So you gotta love these new pink buses in Mexico City. Some of you I know here are from Mexico. I don't know if you've seen these buses or gotten on them. But these are, girls and ladies got really tired of being pinched and prodded and touched. Yeah. Then you have these pink taxis as well. Access to education. In terms of place strategies, we need to create schools that are closer to home. We need to provide more female teachers. We need more flexible school hours so that if girls need to work on farms, at home, anywhere they can. Here's an example of a place strategy, a mobile school for women in India. Safe spaces. This is a young woman who actually is in one of the first shelters in Afghanistan with her baby Shafiq, who was born in prison. She was in prison for 7 months because she left her husband, which was a forced marriage, and she married a man that she wanted to marry. So she was in jail. She is now in a safe space. Women's rights have become more of a priority in Afghanistan. Access to health care. There are certain parts of the world, in one state in India, 80% of the women need permission from their husbands to go to a health center. And PEPFAR, the PEPFAR program, funded by former President Bush, is actually increasing access to ART for women living with HIV in Africa, extending hours. This is near and dear, access to breastfeeding support with the UNICEF Baby Friendly Hospital. Some of you in this participating in the conference work in agriculture and in the environment. If women had access to more resources, yields, on-farm yields would increase, and they say that it could reduce the number of hungry people in the world by actually 12 to 17%. Also, extension programs are traditionally targeting men, and so women aren't getting the extension services or resources they need, not to mention they don't have the land rights. The men hold all the land rights. So Bill Gates did this great speech in Saudi Arabia, terms of access to employment and economic opportunity. He was asked by one of the participants whether he thought the country could become one of the world's most competitive economies. And his answer was, if you're not utilizing half the talent in the country, you're not going to get too close to the top. Again, access to economic independence. One example is the Dress for Success program, which is sort of where price and place meet one another in terms of social marketing, providing access to professional clothing for low-income women. Affordable childcare, access to that. In terms of policy, policy can make or break gender equity, and it certainly makes the other P's official. But women basically lack at the moment in many countries the right to choose a husband, to own land, to go to school. The list is just endless. The MDG, Millennium Development Goals, you might be familiar with, that these were goals agreed upon by almost 200 country leaders. They are not policy, but they are a force, targets that at least give countries common goals to look at, and they've helped really coordinate efforts between public and private sector. And goal number 3 is actually promoting gender equality and empowering women. So again, a whole laundry list of policy, and some aren't even on this, the Civil Rights Act, many others that have helped to reduce gender inequity, but some of those countries where child brides are really common, they all have policies with legal marriage age, but you can't fight ingrained tradition with policy alone, certainly. The probably most important legislation right now on the Hill is the International Violence Against Women Act. And this is a law that actually looks at foreign policy and integrates gender strategies into foreign policy, specifically violence against women strategies. It's a wonderful legislation, and hopefully it will pass. Hillary Clinton, when she was in state, USAID created a gender policy. Again, you can take a look at this online. So the big question is, can we change ingrained tradition and belief with legislation? I think we all know that it takes a comprehensive program that combines downstream, midstream, and upstream efforts to look at individual beliefs, using the media for social norms, popularizing new behaviors, as well as legislation. One of the last P's, without programs, we certainly couldn't implement any of the other P strategies. Programs like Room to Read that gave this young woman in Vietnam a scholarship so that she could stay in school, despite the fact that her parents actually burned her books in 8th grade. They didn't want that. The Girl Effect, funded by the Nike Foundation, which just came up with the Girl Declaration to put more girls' rights into the Millennium Development Goals that were left out in the last writing. Men as Partners and Gender Health has a wonderful global program that, again, looks at redefining manhood. The He for She is a social media program sponsored by UN Women. And then there are another P, all those partners. Without public-private sector partnerships, we couldn't do it. Parents, how many of you are parents? As Gloria says, we begin to raise daughters more like sons, but few of us have the courage to raise our sons more like daughters. Again, what we need to promote, what we need to be marketing and selling is potential, our prospects, the possibilities of becoming whatever we want to be. We need to sell more dreams than showing up in the office in your Maidenform bra. This was a real ad for Maidenform bras. Man, with all these P's, we should all be waking up feeling like princesses, don't you think? One last P, one last P. Yeah? Thank you very much. Thank you.